It's time for Bourbon with Friends, the Bourbon podcast that never takes itself too seriously. Pull up a chair, grab a glass, and remember, a bourbon with friends can change the world. Here we go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Bourbon with Friends. Myself, Adrian, and Martin are here to talk about whiskeys from around the world and how a bourbon with friends can change the world. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
I'm doing great. Great.
Well, we got one positive person here, and then we got one guy picking hairs off his mic again for the second time.
I don't know. Fucking Franco's hairs keep ending up on this thing. Then I don't notice him until we start recording. And I look down and you see this fucking silver hair. Right? He's getting old. It's fine. I'm doing good. I am doing good. I was just like, it was bothering me. I've got OCD.
So. No, couldn't tell that at all.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm doing good. It was a good weekend. You guys have a good weekend? Get outside at all?
I did. Yeah.
Into the wild.
Into the wild. I had to work, so I was slinging cocktails this weekend.
Nice. Any interesting cocktails?
Nope.
Okay.
Fair enough. All right. Thanks for bringing that question.
That's exciting.
Sorry. Nothing out of the ordinary.
No, honestly, so I was outside basically all weekend by the pool, and I don't think I noticed that it was as bad. And maybe it's from last weekend too, but I've got 200,000 fucking mosquito bites on my feet right now, but it's only on my feet. I don't know what the hell is going on there. It's mosquitoes with a foot fetish, and I don't like it. So, yeah, I this seriously all day I've just been doing this all day.
Were only your feet showing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, towards the end of the night, yeah.
I mean,
I was wearing a full bodysuit.
I was going to say, when you have on pants.
I was in a burqa, and then I just, I just had my feet sticking out. No, towards the end of the night, I just got lazy, and I put my jeans back on after we were swimming, and I didn't put my socks back on, and they were literally in the grass for 3 hours. So now I'm paying the price. But I actually don't know how I'm going to relate that. That was
I don't know. That just turned it really bad.
Yeah, I don't know how I can relate that. But,
I mean, you know what? I was at the Marine Corps Relief or Scholarship Foundation helping out kids get scholarships of Marine Corps veterans, so we could do a positive attribute of that. And yes, I did use that one word.
I know, and I should have imagined trying to follow that up with mosquito bites on your feet.
Yeah,
it's not exactly the same thing we did this weekend.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No, it's not. No, it's not. All right, well, Brian, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest, since I can't find a good link here. I tried.
Oh, Jesus. Well, you guys, we have a phenomenal individual on, someone who knows about the industry a little bit more than most people, I would say, right now, because of what she's doing currently. And I'm going to have her introduce herself, because if I say her name wrong, everybody's going to make fun of me. So... Welcome.
Even after confirming?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm still going to mess it up.
7 minutes
100%.
ago?
I am a squirrel 100% of the time with my brain. So.
Well, I appreciate the intro. My name is Morgan Salsman, and I'm with LQD Assets. So we work on the sourcing side of the industry. We do barrel storage. We buy and age barrels ourselves. We've got access to bottling facilities. We help basically get you from picking out your product, what you want to put in the bottle, all the way to a finished product. And then we'll connect you with distributors if you need them to kind of push out your product. So everything from distillery, after they make the product, from there all the way to a finished product, we can help with that.
Nice. I'm just realizing I could have said I was at a pool all weekend, LQD Assets.
There you go. That's a good one.
There it comes.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Martin.
Yeah, I was just throwing it in there.
Yeah.
Save it for next time.
We'll see.
No, Jesus.
So Morgan, it's nice to meet you. I'm glad you could join us today. So I read a little bit about you, and it says you have a degree in civil engineering. So can you give us a little background on that and how you transitioned from that to what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was always a tinkerer growing up. I kind of went into the engineering space. My dad was an engineer, and so always been a tinkerer. So throughout college, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but, I was like, engineering might be a good path. So did that, got out of school, got my engineering degree, and worked as an engineer for about 3 years. But when I was in college, I got the opportunity to start investing in bourbon barrels. I grew up in Bardstown, Kentucky. So, bourbon capital of the world, been around bourbon my whole life. There was brick houses all up and down, the streets, backyards, smells like mash everywhere you go. So it was kind of a second nature part of my life. And so when I started in the investing side, I got really interested in, finance and what it's like to build a business and things of that nature. I'd always had a lot of entrepreneurial interest as well. And so, we started that program. I invested with them for several years. It started to grow. The gentleman who had started it had said, hey, this isn't just friends hanging out anymore. It's like a business, and we don't really have the time to run it. So I raised my hand and I said, I'd really love to continue to do this. What if I build a program and you guys can be the passive investors? And they were like, we like that idea. So while I was at my engineering job, started building the same kind of program, and it started to grow and grow to where I had to pick between the two. And on my way out, the last project I got to design, engineering project, was our warehouses. So we built some facilities. When they're completed, it'll be 160,000 barrels, all palletized storage. And so, I got to design that while I was on my way out the door to transition into this world full time. So we've got about 58,000 barrels under contract right now to be moved in by the end of October. And then we're doing kind of on a case-by-case basis, deciding which or when we're going to pull the trigger on the next building. So we just started on the third warehouse building, and there will be 5 on site when we're finished.
That's incredible. That's really awesome.
Thanks.
When I think about something like that, I think about the courage it must have taken to really kind of leap into that, or just to set your foot in there. I mean, because you typically in situations like that, it's an all or nothing type of deal. So I don't know. Can you elaborate on that a little bit about what that felt like to do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love talking about this too. So I remember being on the phone with my sister one day, and she was like, well, what all, and my dad, both of them in the same day. And they were like, well, what all do you have to do, by the next time you're going to purchase barrels? And I wrote down the hourly tasks. I was like, this is how much time I'm going to have to spend. And the company that I worked at had half day Fridays. So I would spend my entire Friday from noon to 5 p.m. working on this business. And I was like, how many Fridays are left in the year? Is that enough time to get all the things done by the end of this year that I needed to do? And when the answer was hell no, I was like, I got to do something about this. And so that was on a Wednesday. I made the decision on that Wednesday night, okay, I have to quit my job. What does that look like? And I was like, on Friday afternoon, I'm going to walk in and quit my job. Thursday afternoon, my project manager comes in and he says, I've got a brand new project for you. It's awesome. It's going to be 2 years long. And I was just sitting at my desk, shaking my leg. I have to tell him, I've got to tell him, I've got to tell him. So I just walked in there on Thursday afternoon and I was like, look, it's been a great time, but I've got to leave. I've got a passion in this industry, and I've got a passion to be an entrepreneur. I've got to see this through. And let's, we'll wrap up my time here, but I'm out the door. And he was like, okay, well, thanks for the time. And, I had been expressing interest in the bourbon industry. We'd been pursuing distillery projects. So, it was very apparent that that's where I was headed. I think the timeline just was a little quicker than I expected, or they expected. I had been building the company for probably almost 2 years before I left my engineering job. So, and on August 30th of this year, I will have been doing this full time for a full year.
Cool. That had to have been so exciting. Maybe exciting scary and kind of terrifying at the same time. I don't know. Yeah. I'm just trying to think what that must be like.
Yes. Yeah. And, I had expected that it would be a long time before I started seeing the results of my, fruits of my labor, but it came so much faster than I expected because I didn't realize how much I had done in those, 2 years prior while I had my full-time job. I'd never sat down and logged how far I'd come. And it was much farther than I gave myself credit for.
I think we do that sometimes. I think we don't often give ourselves enough credit and pat ourselves on the back. So great job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, that's a bit of an understatement from where you came from to what you're doing now, especially not leading the industry, but showing people how to be an entrepreneur at where you're at currently, going from civil engineer to someone who does a passion of theirs and just continues forward with it. It's absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's very, very different, to be building a distillery or to be building a brand as opposed to what I'm doing. I'm being that middleman. So it's a lot of B2B stuff. So you guys probably have more experience in those other sides than I do. So I'd love to kind of hear, your experience with that.
I think I would be the only one in the industry here a little bit.
He would be right.
Yeah. I just drink whiskey. I just really like whiskey and drinking it. But no, I mean, I do. I think the one thing that is nice is that we obviously we know things. It's not just like we just went out and bought a bunch of Jack Daniel's bottles. There's nothing wrong with that. But like we're actively seeking out new things, different things, interesting things, and always kind of keep our ear to the ground. And that's the nice thing about having this community that we have. That obviously started, well, at least for these other individuals that I'm friends with here, is on Instagram, and to build out a kind of a big community of people who can share knowledge like that. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, and it's cool to like be able to share that with anybody else who's like, kind of wants their ear to the ground and has a company or a business that needs to know that kind of thing. Like what are people interested in? What are people drinking? What do they want to drink? Like what's the newer, more hot bottle that's on the streets, things like that. So I think there's a lot of value in that too. But usually I just drink whiskey is kind of what I was trying to say right there. No long-winded thing.
Hey, but you're the consumer everyone's looking for. You're the guy that knows what you're talking about, likes to consume it, and it'll tell you if it's not good.
Yeah, I will.
That's a good point.
You gotta have the good critics and the bad critics. I mean, if somebody always tells you what you're doing is great, you're not going to grow.
Nope.
Exactly.
Nope.
So I know we met at Whiskeys of the World in Nashville, and it was a pleasure meeting you there. I'm a little curious now, out of all the distillers and all the different craft brands that were there, which one did you enjoy the most, or which one were you looking at to pair with your company to possibly expand it?
So there are several that I already have relationships that were there. Honestly, you were one of the brands that I spoke with that I think had one of the most fruitful conversations. Just connecting with my, time that I spend in Colorado and things of that nature, as well as being in the whiskey industry. And my partner DeMarco and I, that was there with me, we really, really enjoyed your table, and we were like, we need to go back. So, we had a great time tasting your products. I had not consumed them before. So, it was a great, great first impression. RD1 was there. I love their stuff too. Pursuit Spirits was there. Love their stuff too. They use some of the same producers that we use. So we see them at, client events, and things of that nature too. So it was great to, kind of it's just, touch points at that point. And it was local, easy to get to. So, I'm always looking for new brands to partner with, like you'd mentioned, going to those kinds of events, but there's a lot of touch point kind of things going on too.
Absolutely. I mean, having the conversation with you and learning a little bit more about you during that event was an absolute pleasure, especially your partner as well, getting to know that you guys actually enjoy the spirit and not just enjoy buying the spirit and reselling it. Is even something more exciting to see out there nowadays. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming over to the table and just talking to me. So I really enjoyed that conversation.
Yeah, I know it can get lonely back there behind the table. So especially when you can't be drinking with us.
Oh, who said I wasn't drinking with you? I just wasn't drinking a lot with you.
That's fair.
So another question, we're going to go into your business side now. If a client came up to you, or a prospective client came up to you how does this interaction start? Where's the starting point and where's the ending point? How do we get the ball rolling?
Yeah.
Or how does the client do that?
Yeah. So, we're really looking to start them out with, what do you want your brand to be? Hopefully at that point, they already have branding or an idea of their name or something of that nature. And I've got a marketing group that I work with very, very closely. And so, they can help you with brand development, things of that nature, if that's needed. Hopefully that's already done by the time you get to me. So then we'll go through, okay, what kind of profile are you looking for? And we've got an inventory list that we'll send over. We usually start with our personal inventory list because it's very flexible in the terms. So, we do very small quantities. We'll let you get started. We'll be your partner. I like to say we hold the financial responsibility of the aging process. So we can start you with new fill if you want. But as you know, it's really hard to start a brand off of new fill. You're going to have to wait years to put that product in a bottle before it can go on the shelf. So we usually suggest starting with some of the older products that we have, trying those out, getting some samples, and then kind of developing. Do you want to proof it down? Do you want a cask strength product? And then, evaluating, okay, how many barrels do we need to do for you? Do you already have a bottling partner? Are you looking for that? Because we have bottling partners that we work with in multiple states, some in Tennessee, Kentucky, New York, some out west as well. So, we kind of see what you're looking for and where you're located, what your audience is going to be, and connect you with a lot of people to help you handle that. We'll do tours to come check out our facility, try the products, and then, take you to some of our bottling facilities and see what fits for you. Then we'll get you a bottling quote together, pick out your glass, things of that nature, and see what that package is going to do, give you an all-in cost. This is what we're estimating it's going to be for the liquid, for bottling, things of that nature. Here's where you're going to store it. Just kind of get you a plan together to get you a finished product. And then, obviously we pull the trigger on that. Takes several months to get that going, depending on where you're starting. And then hopefully we're doing that once a year, having that same conversation once a year. Do you have enough product? What's your depletion rates like? And then, the ball gets rolling from there. You get to grow. We get to grow with you. We can customize your whiskey as you are able to tier down to that new fill, because we have, large contracts with our distilling partners. So that really allows you to come in under us as an umbrella, because a lot of times those smaller brands can't buy the 500,000 barrel quantities that distilleries require you to take down in order to get a direct contract with them. So we kind of act as that umbrella for them. So we'll have 5 or 6 brands going in on one mash bill to take down from a distillery. And then, you have the option of a futures contract where you say, hey, I want to, buy this product in 4 years, but we want to be this specific mash bill. We want to customize it. But you're not necessarily financially responsible to purchase them. You're just under contract to purchase it as it ages. So a lot of flexibility on that side.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving an avenue to someone that wants to start a brand to possibly give them a kind of financial backing that they wouldn't normally have. So that's exciting to see. Yeah.
And that's what no one wants to give up equity in their business, particularly at the beginning, if you don't have to. So we want to be able to give you that financial ability to grow and get yourself started. And a lot of brands are really not looking for profit margins as much as they are scaling their case sales. So, because, at the end of the day, ideally you get acquired by a conglomerate like Sazerac or something of that nature. Traditionally, that's what you're looking for. And so you don't have a lot of that cash flow coming in.
Right. Absolutely. And speaking of cash flow, this leads on to the next question pretty well. You say on your website, you offer investments. So for people to invest into barrels.
Yes.
Can you explain that? What's the level of commitment that someone has to do? Is there a tier system with that as well? Like your other system, getting a brand started?
Yeah. So we offer an investment program for accredited investors to participate in barrel purchases. We do have a minimum investment. You purchase about 15 to 20 barrels, depending on where you're working with and what the prices are at that time, because, prices change almost like a commodity. on, those contracts that you're working with. Larger quantities, cheaper, vice versa.
Right.
So we buy them as new fill, age them for 3 to 5 years traditionally, and then sell them to brands. And so you get to participate in that capital growth over time. So you're buying at a new fill, cheapest it's ever going to be. They're going to be moved to our warehouses where they'll be stored and then aged. And then they're constantly being sold on the market. Small quantities, large quantities, trying to get those brands involved to make sure that, the investors are seeing payouts. But you don't get paid out until those barrels are sold. So that's why I consider it a lumpy investment. So you're not getting a dividend every quarter or every year necessarily. You're getting that full payout when the barrels are sold.
Okay. So whatever that investment is, you could say 6% or 7% interest, whatever realm that they fall into with their investment capital that they're pushing. So that's kind of exciting to see as well. I've known a few other companies that have done that in the past. 10th Mountain Whiskey has done that in the past to get some money in, and then people get that, and we give them an investment at the very end when those barrels are sold as well. So completely understand that and love what you're doing with it, and excited to see you guys grow in that way. So
thank you.
It's awesome.
Our returns are quite a bit higher than that because I'm a pretty lean team. So I'm the only full-time employee. We've got several contract employees. I think we've got 5 or 6 contract employees between marketing, accounting, personal, virtual assistant, and then warehouse team. And so, all part-time employees other than me, keeping us a very lean company, which allows us to give a lot more of those returns back to the investor.
Yeah. Not a lot of overhead.
Exactly.
That's exciting to see as well. I feel kind of bad for the warehouse guys though.
Hey, we're fortunate to have a group of guys out there who are building the warehouses right now with a construction company that my family used to own. So we kind of double-edged sword it. And while they're out there, they get to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get the whole thing going at the same time. But we won't be able to do that forever. Once the project is finished, we'll have to pay employees to be out there. We'll have a security team, all that kind of stuff too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that may be a smart idea.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a little guard tower out at the front of the site. It's fully fenced in. There's security systems on all the buildings. It's very secure. What's the movie? There's a documentary on Netflix. It's like The Heist. And it's about the Bourbon heist from Buffalo Trace.
Yeah,
so we don't need to do that going on.
That's fair. I mean, getting one of those barrels and sneaking out with it may lose some capital, but you may get a big insurance claim at the end if that happens.
That's very true.
If they get away.
Very true.
So I was actually taking a look just because I'm nerdy like this, and looked at the inventory that you guys have, and obviously I can see that you guys work with companies, MGP, which is within this industry, it's a no-brainer to work with them just because they do supply to so many new up-and-coming brands, and then obviously Bardstown, and then Green River. So obviously you're starting bourbon. Is there ever with kind of like that emerging American single malt scene, even things like rum and mezcal and tequila, which are becoming maybe not quite as popular as something like bourbon, but they're certainly coming up as more craft brands that are starting all over. Is there any thoughts of ever working with like a different kind of spirit, or even something from like people from overseas, like different companies from overseas?
Yeah, so we've got access to everything. So, that's the inventory list that I send out because we have all those barrels in our inventory right now, and we're very flexible with the terms. But, I have inventory from all over the world that comes into my inbox, just being in the spirit space, particularly in the bulk spirit side of things. People are like, hey, are you interested in tequila? I have an investment program in tequila. Do you have any investors that would want to cross swords on that? What's your situation? Do you have any brands that are looking to, expand outside of the bourbon space and pull on a tequila or an American single malt? I have a much larger inventory list of hundreds of thousands of barrels, but you can't distribute that. I mean, you're throwing all your cards on the table.
Yeah.
So, yes, we have access to, tequila, rum, Irish whiskey, Canadian whiskey, everything you can think of. We can help build those brands as well. That's just not necessarily my knowledge base. So I have other consultants I would connect you with to build that brand, although we could help you with the liquid.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the nice thing is that like, your focus, which obviously is going to be bourbon, but it's nice to see some of these other spirits kind of coming up and being something that like I try to push a lot to try new things. And it's obviously kind of reflecting that there's brands coming to you like, hey, what can you help us with this? That's awesome. So we'll switch gears here. Usually we ask a question that has nothing to do with whiskey. And I don't know, we're 14 or 15 episodes in as the new host. And I don't, at this point, remember where we started talking about squirrels. I don't. But we always ask a question that has something to do with a squirrel.
Okay.
Either I come up with it, Brian comes up with it, Adrian's come up with some. And I think it started because you had a squirrel in your backyard, like our very first podcast, right, Adrian? Like it was laying there, it was staring at you the whole time.
Yeah, something like that.
So that was the origin story of this. So we were just looking for really just to kind of break it up, because obviously we can sit here and talk about whiskey all day. But so your question, the one that you get today, and you can think about this for how long you need to, because it's a super complicated squirrel question. So if a squirrel came to you and was interested in purchasing a barrel, would you be more surprised that they are into bourbon or this squirrel can actually talk?
I would be worried about how they're going to pay for it. I'm not going to make one.
They don't have pockets.
I love that.
Yeah.
God, I love that.
Yeah. They don't have, yeah.
That was my first thought. It's like, I'm not taking acorns.
No,
You got money, bro?
You're just like, you got to be nuts, man. Like you don't even have.
Yeah,
I just think that's so bizarre. I'd probably be in on it. That's a great story.
It would be a good story.
That's so funny.
That would be good. Awesome. Well, thank you for indulging our weird ass question. I
love it.
Yeah. So, do you just as a bourbon fan, and just because I was also looking at some of your mash bills that you all have, at least from the inventory that I was just referring to, do you have a preferred mash bill as a bourbon drinker?
So, I don't know if I necessarily have a preferred mash bill, but I do really, really like Bardstown has a 75-21-4 product that they do for contract distilling, and we do have a good chunk of that in our inventory, and I really, really like it. It's traditionally had those higher proofs, that 120 plus range. It's going in at 120, but a lot of times that will come down. But I really, really like it. It comes out so smooth. It's got the caramel and the vanilla. Whereas some of the other products we've got on there, there's a little bit more of that heat to it. And I feel like even at, 3 or 4 years old, when we first started tasting this stuff, I was like, there's no way this is 120 proof, and there's no way this is 2 years old. It's just so smooth. So that would be one that I would say is high on my list.
Yeah, they do. They have a really good mash bill on most things they do, but that's probably mine. I really like high wheat and then high malted barley content, just because it really, it's, to me, if you up that malted barley content, it turns a bourbon into a Scotch drinker's bourbon, and vice versa too, because you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, and you kind of can ease people into maybe learning a little bit more about malted barley and what it can do for a spirit like that. So I was just curious, with you working with so many different ones, and I was curious. I'm always curious what people prefer when it comes to their whiskey. So.
Yeah, I do really like those vanilla and caramelly notes. The peppery throws me for a loop sometimes. So of course there's some that you're expecting it, it's a traditional product. But I do really like that smooth vanilla caramel note. Like Woodford was what I kind of grew up drinking. That's what my parents always had around the house. So that's probably where that preference comes from.
Yeah, it definitely is. I feel like I always ask people, even if I find out they're like, oh, I like whiskey, I'm like, oh, what's your go-to? And it's almost always Woodford, double oak. It's the one that it seems to be the one to start people off on that kind of journey, and then they learn about other things, but they always come back to it. Not Brian, apparently.
Yeah, it was for me, not for Brian.
Not for Brian. I know some people who look at that profile and it's like it's really sweet. It's like breakfast, it's like pancakes and syrup, and it's it's too much for some people, but other people, that's like the exact profile they're looking for in a bourbon. So I get it. I get it why it's a little much sometimes. I couldn't do it all the time, but it is very good.
And that's the good thing about it. Everyone has their own sensory memories and their own preferences, and there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah. Well, speaking of memory, this is another question that does have something to do with whiskey. There's nothing to do with the squirrel unless your answer has something to do with the squirrel. But so one thing we always really love to do is to find out we're all different backgrounds. We grew up different places. We have different stories, but we all ended up here on a bourbon podcast. So what is like your favorite whiskey memory? I mean, it might have to do with you starting your company. It might have something to do with something you did when you were a kid that you were, shared a drink with somebody. So it's like, what's your favorite whiskey memory?
So one of them that I really like, and my dad has told me this story over and over again because I was honestly too young to really understand what was happening. But I met Booker when I was a kid. My dad was working on a project there. And I'm going to butcher the story, but he was like, we were walking past the door and he was like, boy, you look like you could use a drink. And I'm like 10 years old, like holding his hand, walking by the door. And he's like, okay. So we walk inside and his wife, he tells her to grab this little flask off the shelf. And there's like this much bourbon in it. And he's like, this is some really, really, really good bourbon. And you're never gonna get to try it, and then has her put it back on the shelf. But then he sits down and shows him how to, this is the best way you're supposed to drink bourbon. You get a glass of ice water, let all the ice melt so the water's 32 degrees, super cold. And then you put equal parts water and bourbon into the glass, swirl it around, and that's the way you're supposed to drink it. And I remember the experience, but I don't remember the details, and I had no idea alcohol, anything of that nature was going on when he was telling that story or his importance. But super cool story for me now. One of my claims to fame, I would say, that I got to meet Booker back in the day.
Maybe a little window into your future.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love I've heard some really cool stories about Booker. And actually I have a couple of bottle Bookers sitting right over there on my shoulder, but I love the stories that I've heard from different perspectives over the years from people that got to meet him, and that's really cool. I love that. I like that story. Like I said, we like to ask that one just because there's so many different stories people have. It could be a drink they shared with like their parents, or like something that they shared around a campfire, and that's how they started a brand. I mean, there's so many different stories we've heard. So now we get to add that one to it. I really like that.
Well, I mean, meeting Booker, Jesus.
Yeah, not bad.
No.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool one. And, growing up in Bardstown, I feel like there's a lot of those kinds of interactions that, you just second nature. You don't really think much of it, but definitely a lot of great people walking around the streets. So be friendly when you're walking around there if you ever make it.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
Well, I'll be down there sometime next month, so I'll have to stop by somewhere and say hi and just drink
you
a lot.
Come hang out with us, and we'll take you on a warehouse tour and give you the whole Bardstown welcome.
Don't tempt me with a good time. It's
He'll do
There
it.
we go. I'll put it on the calendar.
Done. Well, first and foremost, amazing story, amazing woman here that we have on talking about becoming so successful in a career that she created herself from a passion that you created yourself. And it's been an honor. It really has to have you on, Morgan. I have no words besides saying thank you to come on and tell everybody your story, including us and all of our listeners out there of, I wouldn't say rags to riches, right? You were civil engineering. It's not like you weren't hurting for money at that point, but you were moving in the right direction to where you are now an entrepreneur for yourself and moving people into positions and hopefully hiring them soon full time to get bigger and better.
Absolutely.
So that's super exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, this is going to be about our time. We're going to finish up with this podcast and move off to a private chat probably a little bit after this and talk a little bit more and have some fun with it. But Martin, do you want to thank our sponsor for today, and then we'll just close out?
Sure will, Brian. Listen, guys. Whenever I want to head into the mountains, I grab my hacky sack. I get my tie dye. I go into the mountains of Colorado, and 10th Mountain Whiskey is where I'm going with that. Let's thank our sponsors, 10th Mountain Whiskey. They are up in the beautiful mountains in Gypsum, Colorado. You can find them on all social media platforms as well as 10thwhiskey.com. You got some questions for them, go ask. They are available in 40 different states through online distribution, as well as 26 states across the country through regular retail distribution. So go get your whiskey, go into the mountains, have fun. Again, 10thwhiskey.com.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Morgan, for coming on. Adrian, Martin, you guys know it was always a pleasure to have you guys on as well. And just remember, everybody, a bourbon with friends can change the world. Have a good night, day, or wherever you're at in the world.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Bourbon with Friends. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. While you're at it, leave us a review to make it easier for others to find the show. You can also check us out on Instagram at Bwfpodcast. Thanks for listening.